Hitler's inner circle was one which was dominated by powerful men who longed to be favourable in the eye of the Fuhrer of Nazi Germany. There were huge power plays throughout the Second World War, made by people such as Hermann Goring, Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann and Rudolf Hess, who would try to keep favour with Adolf Hitler. One of the most interesting pieces of footage to emerge is that taken by Eva Braun, Hitler's later ill-fated wife, and it shows Hitler in the inner circle enjoying time at the Berghof, the mountain retreat. However, there was one man who was there at the Berghof in a sense to provide Hitler with medical care. Karl Brandt rose to the role of Hitler's personal physician, however his role went sinisterly much further than to tending to Hitler's stomach problems. Join us today as we look at the justified execution of Karl Brandt, Hitler's doctor, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Karl Brandt was born in January 1904 in Alsace-Lorraine, and his father was a Prussian army soldier. He embarked on a career in the medical profession and became a doctor and a surgeon in 1928. His specialism was treating head and spinal injuries. However, shortly after becoming qualified, the Wall Street crash occurred, and this drove unemployment in Germany up as they relied on American loans heavily, and for a newly qualified doctor this was not good. With so many people unemployed, they could not afford to pay for a doctor, and with this, Brandt began to become disillusioned, and he turned to more extreme ideas. He heard of the Nazi Party and of Adolf Hitler, which spoke out to his situation, with the party promising a much more glorious future for Germany, and with this in 1932 he joined the Nazi Party. He first met Adolf Hitler in the summer of 1932, and later then became a member of the SA, Hitler's brown-shirted stormtroopers. In August 1933, Hitler's niece and one of his friends were injured in a car crash, and Karl Brandt, who was working nearby in Bavaria, was asked to help. Hitler was so impressed with how Brandt looked after them that he was invited to become one of the Führer's personal physicians and doctors. He then, in July 1934, transitioned into the SS and became an Untersturmführer. He would become Hitler's escort physician too, helping him whenever he was on visits and being on hand there. In terms of what Brandt did in Nazi Germany, he was one of the doctors who performed abortions in huge numbers on women who were deemed to be racially deficient or were considered mentally ill. These abortions at the time had been legalised by Hitler, and it was stressed that no healthy Aryan abortions were allowed. As time went on throughout the 1930s, he remained close by Hitler's side and as part of his inner circle. Karl Brandt and his wife Annie were close inside the inner circle and were present at Hitler's mountain retreat, the Berghof. They rubbed shoulders with an exclusive group made up of Albert Speer, Eva Braun, Martin Bormann, and occasionally Joseph Goebbels and Heinrich Himmler when they visited. Along with them was Hitler's personal doctor, Theodor Morell. Brandt became incredibly suspicious about the care that Morell was administering for Hitler, and it was suggested that Morell was giving Hitler morphine injections, and subsequently Brandt believed that Hitler was a morphine addict, as was Morell. Hitler shunned these ideas and would not hear any criticism against his closest doctor. Brandt was good friends with later Minister of Armaments Albert Speer, and they would talk about their work at length. The Brandts even had a house nearby to the Berghof and spent a lot of time there when Hitler was in residence. He was loyal to Hitler, and because of this he was appointed to become the co-head of the Aktion T4 programme alongside Philipp Bühler. This was a euthanasia programme, which although enforced the abortions for women seen as genetically defective, it also went much further. Those who were physically or mentally disabled were killed and euthanized by the Nazis. German physicians were given clearance and were allowed to select patients deemed incurable sick after a most critical medical examination, and then doctors allowed them to mercy kill the patients. Karl Brandt would oversee the programme, and it's estimated that from September 1939 until the end of the Second World War, between 275,000 and 300,000 people were killed in psychiatric hospitals across Germany, Austria, Poland, and now the modern-day Czech Republic. It wasn't just adults who were killed. Many children who suffered with conditions were killed aimlessly by sick doctors using injections. These usually contained phenol, and to cover up any suggestion of death, the cause of death was listed as pneumonia. Autopsies would then occur and post-mortems would take place to investigate. Mass sterilisations also took place of those deemed to be racially inferior. Gassings also occurred in the Aktion T4 programme, and it was a truly sadistic scheme aimed at purging those who the Nazis deemed to be inferior out of the Third Reich. Karl Brandt believed that the health of society took precedent over the health of individual people. He believed that those with specific conditions were hopeless and should be granted a merciful death, and he would use the victims to experiment upon. It was Brandt who was given permission by Hitler to coordinate the killings and instruct other doctors to also kill. It's possible that Brandt saw his work as killing those in the T4 programme as a means to an end, similar to how Speer believed that using slave labour was necessary to build the Nazi projects that would allow the Second World War to be won. Brandt was granted additional powers when he was made the Commissioner of Sanitation and Health and received regular promotions within the SS. It's clear that Hitler valued the sadistic work that Brandt was doing, and he rose to the position by April 1944 of an SS Gruppenführer. As the Second World War was coming to an end in Europe, with the seemingly destruction of the Nazi Reich on the horizon, Brandt remained in Berlin until April 1945, when he was arrested by the Gestapo. He attempted to move his family out of Berlin so they could surrender to the American soldiers. Hitler also found out about this, and he was furious and ordered the arrest, and that Brandt, his once close doctor, was charged with treason. He was found guilty, and for this was sentenced to death, but it was the intervention of Heinrich Himmler who would spare Brandt a number of times. Himmler delayed the execution, and after the war Brandt was captured by the Allies. He had managed to outlive Hitler, but he would face justice. Karl Brandt was tried alongside 22 other defendants at the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg in the Doctors' Trial. It was officially titled the United States of America vs. Karl Brandt et al., and it began on the 9th of December 1946. During the trial he attempted to defend himself and took the "I was only following orders" approach that did not work for so many who were accused of Nazi war crimes. He was accused of conspiracy to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, war crimes and performing medical experiments, crimes against humanity committed on German nationals, and membership in a criminal organisation. The charges placed against him also mentioned how he had participated in crimes involving freezing, gassing, sterilisation, bone transplantation, experimentation with seawater, and much more. At his trial he argued, "Would you believe that it was a pleasure for me to receive the order to start euthanasia? For 15 years I had laboured at the sickbed, and every patient was to me like a brother, every sick child I worried about as if it was my own. And then this hard fate hit me. Is that guilt? Was it not my first thought to limit the scope of euthanasia? With the deepest devotion I have tortured myself again and again, but no philosophy or other wisdom helped here. I am a doctor. I see the law of nature as being the law of reason. From that grew in my heart the love of a man, and it stands before my conscience." The court did not agree with Brandt, and did not accept his claims, and for this he was sentenced to death. Before he was executed he wrote to the authorities, "In order to raise the significance of this death sentence above the level of a mere execution of a judicial principle to a level of a deliberate act in the interest of mankind, I am of my free will willing to submit myself to a medical experiment offering no chance of survival." In a sense, rather than face the gallows, Brandt was willing to give his body and life to be used in some sort of human experiment, in some sick trade-off. He was willing to give his life for science and medicine, but not to the executioner on the gallows. On the 2nd of June 1948, aged 44, inside Landsberg prison, Karl Brandt left his cell to go to the execution chamber. He arrived inside the chamber and was led up to the gallows which had been created. The executioner placed a black hood over his head, followed by the noose, and Brandt proclaimed, "How can the nation which holds the lead in human experimentation in any conceivable form, how can that nation dare to accuse and punish other nations which only copy their experimental procedures? And even euthanasia, only look at Germany and the way her misery has been manipulated and artificially prolonged. It is of course not surprising that the nation which in the face of history and humanity will forever have to bear the guilt for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and this nation attempts to hide itself behind moral superlatives. She does not bend the law. Justice has never been here. Neither in the whole nor in the particular. What dictates is power, and this power wants victims. We are such victims, and I am such a victim. It is no such shame to stand upon the scaffold. This is nothing but political revenge. I have served my fatherland, as others have before me. After this tirade with the black hood and noose around his neck, Karl Brandt was silenced finally when the executioner opened the trap door, and as Brandt swung, he tried to mutter his final words. Karl Brandt was a doctor whose influence inside Hitler's inner circle was prominent, and he is a man whose link to the T4 programme cannot be disputed. It's clear that he was involved in the programme to exterminate hundreds of thousands of innocent people who the Nazis deemed to be racially impure. He devoted himself to the Nazi cause alongside his medical studies, and the man who seemed to lose so much during the Wall Street crash found his cause in the Nazi hierarchy and ideology. He's a man whose execution was certainly justified, and unlike his close friend Albert Speer, Karl Brandt would meet his fate and justice at the hangman's trap door. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.